Hi, I'm the PC Expert Amateur, and I have spent quite some time now doing and redoing and changing and refining and learning about AIO testing. AIOs are all-in-one water coolers. It's a simple loop that is composed of a pump and a radiator, some tubes, and a block that connects to the CPU. Now, sometimes the pump is in the block, sometimes the pump is on the tubes, sometimes the pump is in the radiator. And I discussed how where the pump is affects how you can mount that particular water cooler in a separate video that I just recently posted. Today, I want to share the results that I got from the 20 regular tests plus 8 special tests I did on my configuration. Now, just to let you know, the case is a Corsair IQ 5000X RGB mid-tower ATX case. The motherboard is an Asus TUF Gaming H670 Pro Wi-Fi D4. The CPU is an Intel i7 12700K. The graphics card is an XFX Speedster Merc 319 RX 6800 XT Core. The memory is Patriot Viper Steel 3600 MTS or megahertz. Some people say megahertz. And it's 2 by 32 gigabyte sticks. And it is DDR4. Let's see what else. I have 4 SSDs mounted on my motherboard. None of them interfere with the performance of other things. And there's a total of 4. No, not 4. 1, 2, 4, 8. Or 6 or 8 terabytes. I forget. I also have a backup hard drive. I've got other hard drives that are currently not plugged in. My graphics card for these 28 tests has been mounted on this easy DIY fab vertical mount with the ability to sit it on top of the power supply shroud. Unfortunately, they put rubber over the magnets without properly securing the rubber. They should have used a rubber boot instead of this crappy, cheap rubber. And they charge $60-some for this. It's overpriced. If they were to ask $20, $30, it would be worth it. But to me, given the tendency of the rubber to come off and the magnets as I'm moving this around, if I don't remember to pick it up correctly, to scrape paint off of my case's power supply shroud, that was, an unacceptable error. There should have been a rubber boot. The cable goes from the graphics card. It's a separate cable. It's not part of the graphics card. To the PCIe slot. And you can rotate this on so that, like that. So how it's pointed. So it can go anywhere from straight up and down to, I believe it's a 45-degree angle on the shroud. Yeah, 45 degree. And it's not very good at keeping itself tight. So you do have, since I move this around a lot, sometimes the screws get loosened up too much and it's a little bit of an irritation. But it does a pretty good job. Since it's mounted at an angle, it does prevent the graphics card from being smothered by the glass panel on the side of the left side of the case. I also, for this test, aside from the fans on the graphics card and the 3 fans on the 360 millimeter AIO, which was from the Thermalright Frozen Knot, only used one Noctua A12 by 25 as the rear exhaust. There were no other fans involved. For all the regular tests, I did not block any positions. When I was intaking air in a particular mounting position, I would use the dust filter, whether it was fine or coarse dust filter. But when I was exhausting air from that position, I would remove that particular dust filter because that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be putting a dust filter between the exhausting fans and the air outside of the case, because you want to get that air out as fast as possible. So I also have the Corsair RM850X power supply, and I'm using the Thermalright 12th, 13th, and 14th generation bend correction frame on my CPU instead of the default ILM that came with the motherboard. It doesn't really help with temperatures, maybe like 1 degrees, because my CPU tends to run fairly cool. However, it is, I don't have to worry about, with the pressure being uneven because of the way the ILM works. And I think that's most of it. Now, when I did the testing, I did 2 steps within this phase. The first step, all the fans were always positioned on the radiator so that they were, there was the case, there was the radiator, and the fans were here between the radiator and the open air of the case. The second step or stage of phase 1 was to have the fans between the radiator and the case. So I denoted this difference as inner for when the fan, there's the case, the radiator, and then the fans on the inside, and sandwich for when the fans were between the radiator and the case. And this is important because as Norchris, who also did some testing that I'll be referring to, maybe not in this video, but if not this video, the next video, having the fans sandwiched can sometimes give them an advantage over fans on the inside, because sometimes when you pull air through a radiator, it can tend to reduce the efficacy of the fans. Now, it does depend on the fan design. Fans that have lobes at the corners instead of the square design are going to be more likely to lose power in cooling the radiator. I learned from using this Thermalright Frozen Not So Much that and I chose it because it's got a very powerful radiator, 5,300 RPMs, 1,500 I think water flow rate, and so it's a very powerful pump. And I tried putting on the Superflower Mega Cool fans, which are, according to Hardware Busters, Aris rated them as one of the strongest fans that he has available to him. I do have stronger fans, but I don't have them in triplicate. So I wasn't able to use one of those. But the difference in power between the Thermalright Frozen Knots fans and the Superflower Mega Cool fans is enormous. And I got about a 1 degree difference in temperature, which tells me that a faster pump is going to be very useful in helping to dissipate heat faster, as it's circulating through the radiator more often. And if the fans are blowing at a fast enough speed with enough pressure, they're going to dissipate the heat faster than, say, a radiator running at a slower speed. Then you definitely would need stronger fans to compensate, since it's moving more slowly. I did not expect that. That was what I learned during this testing. Now, I always put my results first on bleepingcomputer.com. And typically for this kind of stuff, it's in the internal hardware section of the forums on Bleeping Computer. And just to explain, I was looking at where the AIO was located. Was it on my front location, my side location, or my top location? Now, in this particular case, I can do a 140 millimeter fan on the front or even on the top, but I can't do it on the side. So I had to use a 360, not a 420 millimeter AIO. And then tube orientation. I also looked at that because some tests say that tubes down is better. Some say that tubes up is better. And we're going to see about that. And with the AIO, when it was on the top of the case, I always had the tubes facing toward the front of the case, because having them facing toward the back of the case, there just wasn't enough space to do that, and without interfering with the exhaust fan or something else. And it just was, it's a little bit more awkward. And since I have a large case, why make it harder on myself than it already was? And believe me, all of this mucking about, especially doing the sandwich positionings, oh my God, that was so annoying. I mean, I can do the inner positions, I can switch the fans around in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but with the sandwich positions, it takes 30 to 45 minutes for me to make that change. And whereas with the inner position, I only had to do that change sometimes, I had to do it every single time with the sandwich fans. So that added up to a lot of wasted time with the sandwich fans. And we'll see whether that time was well spent or not. Now, some people find the way that I put stuff on my blog on Bleeping Computer to be irritating. And I don't put all of it in one title. I have different titles. Like my fan reviews, I put in one title. My AIO stuff, I put in another. Some of the other stuff, I would put in another. Some of the stuff I don't put on Bleeping Computer at all at this time. Because mostly right now I'm focusing on the AIOs and the fans. But if you have watched my channel news that I posted recently, you'll know that I have a lot of upcoming tests, and there's actually a test I forgot to put on that list. But anyways, the next thing I looked at was it better when the fans were intaking the air, which means pulling or pushing the air into the case, or was it better when they were exhausting the air either through push or pull? Additionally, I've only done the vertical mount for the graphics card. In the next stage of testing, as long as the graphics card that I have that's was given to my son, which is a very old EVGA GTX 760 SC, as long as that card will be able to handle Time Spy and Prime 95, actually Prime 95 doesn't matter, but as long as it can handle Time Spy, I will be using that. I tried using it on Destiny 2, and it couldn't handle Destiny 2 at all. The screen went blank as soon as I tried to go into the game from the title screen. I will not, in this testing, I did use Cinebench. Cinebench did not produce any of the, almost any of the hottest temperatures on my tests, with a small number of exceptions, like maybe 3 or 4. But I will continue to use it for the purpose of seeing how the graphics card performs, because this kind of gives an indication, if you're a creator, what you can expect with Cinebench and each configuration, or when you're doing like 3D blending or some of the other things that you can do. Whereas with Time Spy, it's more indicative of what kind of results you can expect when you are, say, watching a video or playing video games. I tried other things like Linpack Extreme and 3D Mark's Port Royal and Speedway, which were recommended to me by one of the guys over at the 3D Bench company, or the 3D Mark company. But when I did the comparisons earlier on, I noticed that Time Spy always got the hottest temperatures. So I dumped Port Royal, and Speedway in favor of just using Time Spy. I also tried Unigine, Unigine's Superposition, Heaven and Valley. Heaven and Valley are older versions, and they were replaced by Superposition. However, although Superposition is cool and you can do some interactive stuff with it, it did not stress the CPU and GPU as much as Cinebench 2024, Time Spy, and Prime 95. So I dumped that one as well. And there was another one that I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was that I tried, but it also did not stress my equipment enough. Now, one thing I did notice during these tests was that when I was running Prime 95, which I did for an hour. Now, somebody complained to me, his name is Norchris. Chris, that you only need to run it for half an hour. Well, no, actually, I found that sometimes half an hour wasn't actually enough. I paid attention because I thought, well, maybe Chris is right, and he was wrong. So I'm glad that I ran it for an hour on every single test. And sometimes I retested when I noticed what looked to be anomalous results. So I did do some retests, several of them actually, to make sure that I was getting the best results possible. I'm not 100% satisfied, but I am convinced that I did good enough that my results are, at least for my computer, are valid. Whether you feel the same way or not, that's up to you to decide. Now, the CPU temperatures that I'll be sharing with you came from Prime 95 testing. The GPU temperatures came from TimeSpy testing. And the Prime 95 testing was set to small FFTs with hyperthreading. The motherboard temperatures came from TimeSpy 2. Almost all the VRM temperatures came from Prime 95, but there are a tiny number of them that came from TimeSpy or Cinebench. There was one actually where all three had the exact same temperature, which was really surprising. Now, you'll have to let me know what you think of the results, but I'm going to list the best. I don't really want to go through all 28 of them. I do want to explain that the 8 special tests were as follows. I did a front mount with the tubes up, intaking air, and the fans were on the inner side. The side panel was blocked with a piece of cardboard. The top was completely open. The glass on the front was off, but the front dust filter was on. Another one I did was side mounted, tubes down, intaking air with the fans on the inner side. The top was blocked, the front was completely open. The third one I did that was special was same position, except the top and front panels were off and the top mesh was off, but the side panel was not blocked. The top panel was not blocked. The fourth one was top with intake and sandwiched fans. The panels and the front dust filter were off, but the top filter was on. The fifth one was the same configuration for the mounting of the radiator and fans, except no glass panels, just the filters. The sixth one, again, same mounting for the AIO, but there was no top panel, no front filter, and the side was blocked. So and then the seventh one, again the same configuration, but no panels, glass panels, no front dust filter, and the side was blocked. And then the last one, same configuration for the AIO, but only the top glass panel was off, the front panel was not off, and the dust filters were not off. And ultimately what I discovered was that of all of these 28 tests, the best one for the CPU, bar none, was actually one of the specials. And that was the first one that I told you about, where it was mounted, the radiator was mounted on the front, the tubes were at the top of the radiator, the fans were taking air in from the inner side of the radiator, the side panel was blocked, the top was completely open air, the front mesh was on, but the glass was off. That one got the best temperature by 1 degree over the second best, which was side mount, tubes up, exhausting, inner mount for the fans. And so we're talking about temperature score of 59 for the CPU, 73 for the GPU, versus 60 for the CPU and 71 for the GPU. And then, if you're really looking for kind of a nice balance between CPU and GPU, the third best was side mount, tubes down, exhaust, fans on inner position, 61 on the CPU, 68 on the GPU. Now, the number 4 position was the, again, fans on the side. However, tubes were up, intaking air, fans were on the inner position of the radiator, and the CPU also had 61 degrees, but the temperature of the GPU was up to 75. So what I've noticed is when you mount the AIO on the side, exhausting does better than intaking in general. Also, according to Norcris's testing, if you have no extra barriers other than filters on the front and the side and the top, the front will always be the best and the side will always be second best. Both of us found that no matter what we did, the top mounting was always on the bottom of the list. It was always the worst of the options to use. Now, and then the top 5 that if you haven't noticed this, and I'm getting to number 5 here, the top 5 best positions were all with the fans on the inner position of the radiator. So number 5 was front mount, tubes down, intaking air, inner position, 62 for the CPU, 71 for the GPU. So again, if you want to go for a compromise, the best one that I saw was the side mount, tubes down, exhausting with the fans on the inner side between the radiator and the open air of the case, giving you 61 and 68 respectively. Now again, this is these temperatures I'm giving you are delta temperatures, which means that I've already subtracted the room temperature from the temperature that I got. And this is important because this allows you to say, well, my temperature in my room is 30 degrees. And this is Celsius, not Fahrenheit, so you're going to have to convert. But my temperature is 30 degrees. That means if I mount, no matter which of these situations I use or configurations I use, when I mount my AIO, my 360 AIO, if we take the best one, the front, tubes up, intaking, inner position, the side mount blocked or non-existent, the top completely open, the front mesh on but the glass off, then you're going to get, with a room temperature of 30 degrees, you're going to get 89 on the CPU, which is okay, not perfect, but it's definitely okay, and that'll be at idle. And you'll get 103 on the graphics card, which is also fairly okay. However, if you start doing anything more than casual work on your computer, you're going to run into trouble, potentially. But again, what I was doing was not idle, so actually, it's not really right for me to say this is what you're going to get when you're on idle. That's not correct. I apologize. This is what you're going to see if you're doing a heavy load. I'm sorry. I just got off of a medication and it's messing up my head. I have really high blood pressure, so I'm kind of wonky right now. So if you're doing something very intensive on your computer, you're going to see 89 for the CPU and 103 for the GPU. The 89 is okay. If you've got one of the newer CPUs that deliberately pushes it up to 95 degrees temperature, you're going to get a little bit of extra power out of it because it's only 89. It'll still go up to 95. But those extra 6 degrees are going to give you a little bit of extra performance out of your CPU. I would be a little bit concerned, however, about the GPU going up to 103 because that is close to what most GPUs where it's close to where they will be having some problems. Some of them will definitely be having problems. So if you are working and doing heavy work in a 30-degree room, I hope not. But if you are, and I know there are millions of people out there that don't have cool temperature and they don't have air conditioning, they don't have any way to keep their room cool, you're definitely going to want to go with, again, number 3, side mount, tubes down, exhausting, fans on the inner position. So that's the top 5 for your CPU results. Now, if we look at things in a different way, talking about the different things I was testing, when you compare inner versus sandwiched, and you compare like test to like test, so top mount with intaking air, inner and sandwiched, the inner will be generally will be likely to be better than the sandwiched. Almost every time, inner was better than sandwiched. I think there was one test or maybe two where sandwiched was actually better. Let me just see. Oh yeah, on the front mount, tubes up, exhausting, which is not ideal because you're going to get high temperatures actually, but sandwich actually performed better in that case. And with the side mount, tubes down, intaking, which is also not ideal for a side mount, the sandwiching was 1 degree cooler than inner. And so if we look at front mount, tubes up, exhausting, that was 4 degrees better than inner, but both had high temperatures of 68 and 72 delta respectively. And then with the side mount, tubes down, intaking, with sandwiching being 1 degree better, we're still talking about a difference of 62 and 63 degrees respectively. So not a big deal there. All the other tests came out with inner being better, sometimes only by a degree, sometimes as much as 7 degrees better. So if you're going to choose from the perspective of installation, from the perspective of risk of stripping the mounting holes on the radiator, from the perspective of temperatures, inner is just the best choice. Trust me when I say doing a sandwich mount is a pain in the butt, and generally speaking, from my testing, it's just not worth it, with very rare exceptions. Now, as far as front versus side versus top, again, between my testing and Norcris's testing, if you're using the my case where there's a glass panel with open sides, like there's like a 1-inch opening on either side of the glass panel for air to go in or out on the front and on the top. If you leave those panels there, like if you have pets and you don't want them to scratch up the dust filter, you don't want them to scratch up the dust filter, okay? Then the best place to mount your AIO is on the side. If, however, you can remove those front and top panels, or you just don't have those kinds of restrictive cases, then the front is going to be the best choice. Now, if you have a restrictive case where there's just this little channel for air to be pulled in or pushed out in the front, intaking air on the front is going to be better than having the air on the top, the water cooler on the top. Now, if we look at just front mounting, what's the best? What's the worst? Out of the 4 positions, front tubes down, front tubes up, intaking and exhausting, the best one was with the tubes up and the fans intaking air. That was the number 1 again, with the special one that got 59 degrees. The second best was the fan with tubes down, intaking air. Again, this is also with the fans located on the inner side of the radiator, and that got a temperature of 62 degrees Celsius. Whereas, the sandwiched was not so great. It was 66 for the front up in take, and it was versus 59 and 62 respectively for the special and the regular setup or configuration, with the tubes up. And with the tubes down, there was a gap between the tubes down intaking air of 62 versus 65 between inner and sandwiched. So that gave it a ranking of 5 for inner And then for exhausting, it was ranked 19 for inner and 21 for sandwiched, with only 1 degree difference. Terrible, 67 and 68. So again, the important point here is if you're going to mount on the front, tubes up or tubes down is the best option, even if you can't do the special configuration I was talking about. Okay, you're still going to get tubes with tubes up or tubes down, intaking air on the front, with the fans on the inner side of the radiator. You're going to get 62 degrees plus room temperature. Now, for side mount, and I'm going to just shorten this up because I feel like I'm confusing you by giving you all this extra detail, and that's not what I want to do. Of the four, tubes down, exhausting, tubes down, intaking, tubes up, exhausting, tubes up, intaking, the best of the four, and they were all very highly ranked. In fact, these four were ranked 2, 3, 4, and 6 for inner, except for the 6, which was sandwiched. And then for the inner on that particular one, which was the side down intake, it was number 10. Now we're talking about it for tubes down, exhausting, 61 versus 64, inner versus sandwich. So the inner is better. And we're talking about for tubes down, intaking, sandwich was better at 62 degrees. So that's 1 degree hotter than exhausting. And then if we do tubes up, it was 60 degrees temperature on the inner position, and that means 1 degree better than the tubes down exhausting. So tubes up exhausting is 1 degree cooler than tubes down exhausting, which is 1 degree cooler than tubes down intaking. And then finally, the tubes up intaking was the same temperature as the tubes down exhausting, 61 degrees. So your best choice, if you're going to do a side mount, not messing with anything else, your best option is to do the side mount, tubes up, exhausting, the fans on the inner side of the radiator, not sandwiched. And but keeping in mind that if you need to balance the temperature for the CPU and GPU, side mount, tubes down, exhausting with inner position is your best compromise position of all of them by far. Now, I know some people are like, but I need my GPU to be cooler. Well, then you need to figure out a solution, like having fans that have air channeled with ducting directly to the graphics card, or putting a water block on the graphics card so you're water cooling the graphics card. There's just no good solution for protecting your CPU and cooling your GPU as in one, unless you're going to do a custom loop, and a custom loop is a pain in the butt. So again, top mount, absolutely worst choice there is. It doesn't matter whether it's intake at 64 degrees or It doesn't matter whether it's exhausting on inner at 64 degrees or exhausting on sandwiched 65 degrees. It doesn't matter if it's intaking inner 64 degrees. It doesn't matter if it's inner intaking sandwiched at 71 degrees. Now that's bad. That's one of the worst scores. That's the second worst score, or temperature, I should say, for the CPU. So we want to, as much as possible, avoid top mounting on a fan, a case like the one that I've got. Now, can you possibly change the airflow such that top mounting can become better? Yes, but you're going to have to experiment. Again, my results are not valid for every computer. They're not valid for every case. The results from any test are not valid for every computer or every case. If you've got, say, a micro ATX or an ITX case, you're not going to have all that space for mounting stuff. Even you're probably going to have like one, maybe two places where you can mount an AIO if you're lucky. And still, it's going to be, unless it's in a supremely well-designed ITX case, you're going to struggle to keep it cool. So, what do we think about tubes up versus tubes down? There's no statistically useful improvement either way consistently. Okay, but I told you the cases where up is better, where down is better, but it kind of flip-flops depending on which location you're looking at, whether it's inner sandwiched or up and down. It's just all over the place. Intake versus exhaust. Top exhaust is better generally than intake is going to be. Front intake is always better than exhaust, sometimes a lot better. Side exhaust is usually better than intake, but it flip-flops, depends on the specifics, okay? There's no hard and fast rule for some of this stuff other than that top sucks for the CPU and sometimes, and there is also bottom. However, bottom mounting is very, very challenging to do. Number one, you would need to mount the block on the CPU in such a way that air cannot get trapped in the CPU, because that's going to be the highest point of the loop. So unless you can add in some kind of a thing that's going to allow you to add more water and get rid of air, like a reservoir, which that's a custom loop then, you're going to have to make sure that most likely, if the tubes are long enough, the tubes are going into the block on the CPU from the top, or worst case scenario from the side, but upper side, not lower side, if they're offset instead of being square in the middle of the water block. You do not want them going up into the block because air is going to get trapped up in there. Also, you must choose a radiator that either has the pump in the radiator itself, doesn't matter whether it's in the body or the end of the radiator, or mounted on the tubes, and that will be safe. Anything else for a bottom mount, and you're going to be screwed. Also, if you're bottom mounting, there has to be adequate ventilation to allow the fans on the water cooler, to suck air in. So whether that means there's mesh at the bottom, or that means that the bottom is raised up off of the surface that the case is resting on, especially if it's resting directly on carpeting. Especially that, because even if you're not going to do a bottom mount, you do not want to suffocate your power supply. And putting it so that the intake or exhaust is directly or almost directly against the radiator, you're going to suffocate your power supply, and it's going to die faster than it normally would. All right, so now I wanted to talk about a few other things about motherboard and VRMs and stuff. I'm going to do a separate video for that one. I want to get this one done and out for everybody. I wish I could do some visuals, but right now my focus is getting this information out there. I will do a secondary video in which it'll be a shorter video than this, in which you'll be able to see very easily the pros and cons of each of the 28 tests that I did. So you can say, oh, this is number 1, this is number 2, and this is number 28. And it'll be easier for you to understand. And that it takes me time to set up every single picture. So if you have any questions, put them down below in the comments. Please like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can to help me raise awareness of this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're able to understand what I have been relaying to you verbally. The only other thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you some of my data so you can see the temperatures for yourself. So stay tuned. Don't go away right now. You can see the data. It's not in a pictorial display. It's just the graph, or not the graph, the chart, the matrix in my spreadsheet. So just hold on there. Okay, thanks for sticking around. We're going to take a look at the actual results. Now, if you take a look here, you can see over here we have the configurations, and the ones that are on the bottom from, say, about here on down, I would say don't use any of those configurations. They just are not going to benefit your CPU enough. And if you if you have front mount, then you're going to need to go for this one, or this one, or this one. If you want to go for side mount, it's going to be this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Do you sense a trend? This one, this one. Those are the best ones for side mount. And but if you want to compromise between your CPU and GPU, like I said before, this is your best bet. 61 and 68 degrees minus the, and that's minus the room temperature. I'm showing you delta temperatures here. Okay, so what you're seeing over here in all of these columns here has already had this column subtracted from them. So that's important, because that means that you can take these temperatures and you can add your room temperature to them, and you will know under heavy load, and when I say heavy load, I mean heavy load, how hot your CPU and your GPU are likely to get, especially if your case is similar to or the same as what I'm using with a side, top, and front mount large mid-tower ATX. And again, I'm using the 360 millimeter AIO. So if we take a look, the absolute best one was when I took the top glass panel and mesh off, when I took the front glass off but left the mesh on, and I blocked the side, I got the best results for the CPU of only 59 degrees Celsius. And then according to Time Spy's testing, the best I got for that was 73 degrees Celsius for the GPU. Now, can you get better? Yes. Number 3 here, and that was front, tubes up, intake, inner positioning of the fans. This one is side, tubes down, exhaust, inner positioning of the fans. You get 61 degrees. That's only 2 degrees hotter than the best one. And you get 68, which is 5 degrees better than the first one. Okay, so 2 degrees worse, 5 degrees better. It's a good compromise position. Definitely can stand by saying that one is a great choice for a lot of people. Again, however, if you have a significantly different case than mine, you may want to do some experimenting to see what's going to work for the best for you. And in almost all cases, as you can see from the list here, all of the top mounts are at the bottom half, or in the bottom half. So top mount is something you want to avoid as much as possible for your CPU. Now, some of them not too terribly bad for your GPU, like these 3 are not too bad, and that one is not too bad. Then we got some marginal ones like that one, that one, that one, and, well, that's not even a top mount, that's a front mount. But yeah, so there are things that, but again, you're putting your CPU, your AIO water cooler, all-in-one water cooler on here for your CPU, not for your GPU. There are other ways to help your GPU not die of heat exhaustion, and thus but I think I've already talked about that. If I forgot to explain how to do that in a previous video, would you please just put a note down there, or if you want me to make a separate video explaining how to give more air to the graphics card, how to give more air to the motherboard, how to give more air to the VRMs, I'll be happy to put out a separate video exclusively for that information. So our top positions are front, and if you look here, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all with the fans on the inner side of the radiator exposed to the case air. And then we have sandwiched, inner, sandwiched, sandwiched, inner, inner, inner. And when we get to that last one here, that's the cutoff line. I'm just going to say you don't want to go higher than 63. Because if your room is 30 degrees, that's a 93 degree temperature. you're not going to get a lot of extra performance out of your CPU. You want to go for the top of the list so you can get the most extra performance possible out of your CPU without overclocking. You can also do undervolting to help to further reduce the temperatures. Undervolting is a safe and effective way. You'll lose very little performance and you'll make your CPU happier. Same thing with the graphics card. You can make it happier by undervolting your graphics card so the GPU doesn't get too hot. Right. So we can look over here. We can see that the Prime 95 was the most stressful for the CPU. TimeSpy was the most stressful for the GPU, and Prime 95 was the most stressful for the VRMs, which are those kind of banks of like bleacher kind of looking things or heatsink things that are in the corner near the CPU socket. And then for the motherboard, it was a little bit confusing because there was one where the hottest temperature for the motherboard came from Prime 95. There were two where the hottest temperature for the motherboard came from Cinebench 2024's multi-core CPU test. And then all the other ones were actually from TimeSpy. So yeah, it's a little bit weird, but these anomalies do occur, and there may have been specific reasons why the motherboard was getting more stressed in one case by Prime 95 and two cases by Cinebench. And there was this one case here, front down exhaust inner, where all three tests gave the same temperature of 13 degrees after subtracting the ambient temperature of the room. So those are the temperatures. You might want to take a screenshot of this so that you can keep this in mind when you're trying to decide how to configure your water cooler, if you get it. If you don't have a really hot water cooler and your water cooler isn't struggling to keep your your air cooler isn't struggling to keep your CPU cool, you don't really need a water cooler. There are advantages, like when I finished doing even Prime 95, within less than 10 seconds, my CPU has already dropped down to close to baseline temperatures. So it's very fast at, especially since I chose one with a strong pump. It's very, very fast at getting rid of that heat and then bringing the CPU back down when you're done with that heavy load of work that you're doing on your computer. But you can, and with many CPUs, except for the really hot 13th and 14th generation ones, and then some of the newest i7 and i9, and then some of the AMDs are designed to pump the temperature to 95 to boost performance, but you can still drop the temperature and you'll still push it up to 95 and you'll get even more performance. So you have to look at, number one, budget. Generally speaking, air coolers, especially if you're not going to be buying brands where they overcharge, and there are several brands that overcharge, looking at you, Noctua. But Noctua does take things to another level of engineering better than most other companies, and they provide good support. They provide extras with a lot of their stuff, and that's part of the reason why. And they've got a 6-year warranty. But if you're going to go on the lower end of the price scale, you'll be able to get something really inexpensive, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe even 10, 20 bucks in some cases. You can get an air cooler that not only is good for your current CPU, but will also be good for your next CPU potentially, especially if the socket is different, but they provide a replacement for the socket, so you'll be able to mount it anyways. Like I ordered the Raid Max Tornado LC360, which I thought was compatible with my LGA 1700 Intel CPU. I got it. There was no mounting kit, and it didn't say on the box that it was compatible, but I contacted Raid Max, and they were very kind to ship me for free the mounting kit for my particular CPU, so I will be able to test that So, because you don't hear much about RAID Max, and I'm very curious as to how it performs. I have a suspicion I know, but I don't want to say anything at this point. So these are the temperatures. This is what you can expect to get unless your case and your computer are radically different from what I've got. You may even have lower temperatures than I have if you have a more minimalist setup than I do. I've got a very heavy-duty setup. I've got 4 storage devices, SSDs that is. I've got hard drives. I've got lots of memory. I've got not particularly hot CPU, but for some people it runs hot. For me, it doesn't. And I've got a big graphics card and this big case, and so it all kind of balances out. If you add more case fans in the right places, you can drop these temperatures even more than what I did. I was going for the minimalist approach here to try and see if I just have that one exhaust fan, what's that going to do for my temperatures. I never changed it from exhaust to intake to see how it would perform then. It was always and only on exhaust because I really needed to know what was going to happen. And so, if you are careful and you strategically place 1 or 2 or maybe 3 more additional fans within your case, you may get even better temperatures than what I'm showing you. Thanks so much for sticking around for this. The next video is going to be coming out probably today, and that's where I'm going to be talking about this section over here with the test results from Cinebench 2024 and 3D Mark Time Spy. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and have a great day. I'd like to thank Grindler at Bleeping Computer for allowing me to share my videos and posts on his website. Bleeping Computer has a lot of resources, including vetted programs, malware removal instructions, malware removal volunteers, other kinds of volunteers for IT, cybersecurity information, and more. It's a great place to go. Give it a try. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.